Hey everyone, welcome back to Matt's Digital Odyssey, the podcast where we explore the edges of gaming, tech, and digital storytelling. Tonight we're stepping into the shadows, horror video games. I'm going to take more of a chronological order in this, which is why I'm not alone. First, Chris from Mako Powered is back. He's got a PhD in video game studies and literally wrote his dissertation on Resident Evil. I couldn't do the show without him. Welcome, Chris.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Is there anything you want to talk about before we get started?
I've spent close to a decade immersed in research over horror video games, and I'm really looking forward to this episode.
Excellent. And we have Dustin back on the show, a horror movie and game aficionado.
Hi, everybody. Again, good to be back. Like Matt said, I'm just a general horror fan, and when I first bought my first PlayStation 1, Resident Evil was one of the first games I bought for it, so I've just kind of been a fan ever since. So I'm glad to be a part of this one.
Excellent. And of course, we also now have Cody, Resident Evil fan and horror fan.
Hey guys, it's good to be back. Like we talked about before, I'm a big horror fan, big into horror gaming, and working actor. You know, I'm just out here starving to death, but it's fine.
If you're a creative, you have to starve a little bit. That's kind of how it works. It's just that part and parcel. These guys know their stuff when it comes to scary games and movies. Fellas, welcome. So we're going to start with a bit of horror game history. The first horror game being Haunted House in 1982 from the Atari 2600. It was one of the first survival horror games, spooky eyes in the dark gameplay, and I've never played it, so I don't really know how to talk about it after that.
Okay, I can jump in. It does some interesting things for how primitive it is and how cartoonish it is on the surface, because you do play as a pair of googly eyes. That's because you need to be able to see your character as they're moving around a pitch black house. And so it's trying to evoke this fear of the dark given the archaic architecture of the Atari. So you actually have things like a match that you can light to illuminate the room that you're in. But at the same time, when you light that match, it will draw the attention of whatever monsters are in the room. It's almost like the flashlight in Doom 3 or Silent Hill, but a good 20 years before either of those.
And that's one of like the best game mechanics we have in horror video games is when you've accidentally alerted what is hunting you. It's interesting that it was done all the way back in 1982 on the Atari 2600, where the games, as fun as they were, they were so simplistic.
Oh, absolutely, because we haven't even talked about any of the games with licensed characters or legacy monsters. Like Haunted House, when you're talking horror games that far back, like on the Atari, Haunted House is in the minority because most of the horror games from that era have you playing as the monster.
Like Texas Chainsaw Massacre is the one that stands out to me.
Yep, Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Imagic's Dracula, you actually play as Dracula, and the goal is to consume as many nubile female victims as possible before you either get staked in the heart or the sun comes up.
I mean, on a surface level, that sounds amazing, but there's no way a game will fly like that today. Like, there's no way.
Yeah, I want it to. It's silly. Right. I want a goofy-ass version of that.
I was not really an Atari 2600 fan. Like, the system was really cool, don't get me wrong, but I missed it. Whereas the NES, that's where I jumped in head first. And there's games like Uninvited, which came out and it was like a point-and-click haunted house adventure with like eerie puzzles. But the one I remember playing like so much as a kid was Dr. Chaos. It was a side-scrolling horror game with first-person segments that were kind of like point-and-click, but it was just like weird monsters and weird music, and mice are attacking you, and then you kill them and they turn into slime.
That game was so weird. Dr. Chaos is so crazy. I think the first time I actually played that was on Nesticle. I never actually played it as a kid. I played it when like it was emulated later on. And I was like, what is this? I never heard of this. And then I remember seeing the cover. Like, you see covers in the video stores of games that would just never be returned.
It looks so much better than the actual game it is. It's like, this game looks great. Then you play it like, this is not as great as I was anticipated to believe.
Chiller was on the NES and on arcade, and that one was kind of fun. It was like a shooting horror game where you'd be like in a graveyard and in a haunted house and stuff. It had different levels.
Yeah, that game actually courted a lot of controversy because of the dungeon level where you're shooting the helpless prisoners. And the main goal of that room is just to kill them all while they're helpless and being tortured.
Oh, that's so bad.
Yeah.
Then sticking to the NES, obviously we have like the big ones, the Castlevanias. Another one is Monster Party. Like, even though it wasn't like mostly a horror game, it was just this strange platformer with grotesque bosses, and one of them was already dead, and you had to watch zombies dance. And it's just, I love those strange, obscure games that from my childhood that for whatever reason I got them. I'm like, I don't know what this is. This is amazing. You guys have anything like that?
On NES, like NES was notorious for its movie IPs too, because and it always reminds me of the Purple Jason from
Oh, how
Friday the
did I forget
13th.
about the Friday the 13th NES game? I loved it and I hated it so much all at the same time.
Yeah, it's hard to keep track of where you were on the map if you weren't paying attention. It was just always bizarre seeing this like sky blue and purple suited Jason when you came across him.
Attacking you without a weapon. It just
Yeah.
swiping with nothing.
There are a couple of things to talk about with Friday the 13th. There's the fairly open secret at this point that, yes, it's an LJN game, but it was developed by Atlas. Like Persona, Shin Megami Tensei, that Atlas.
Some really good game. I didn't know that. That's
Yep.
amazing.
And interestingly enough, it pulls from a couple of different movies at that point. It released right around Part 7, A New Begin. So you get elements from that, like Jason sinking into the lake. But you also get his mother's head from Friday the 13th Part 2, where he had it on an altar in an abandoned shack in the middle of the forest. So, like, when you find it, she comes awake and starts flying around the room Castlevania Medusa head style.
Yeah, I was going to say Medusa head for sure is the only thing you could think of with that.
But the interesting thing is once you defeat her, you get her sweater, which is exactly how Jason was defeated in Part 2. So putting the sweater on in-game protects you from Jason there as well. There's some really interesting ideas. Their ambition exceeded their grasp.
That's a good way to put it for sure, because the game itself, like when you start playing it, like an action adventure game, then you're going to get all your counselors killed. I still have like horrible memories of that alarm going off that Jason is killing somebody.
That cabin music in the game is legit haunting.
Yes.
Oh yeah. Yeah,
the music's
it's super
great,
scary.
actually.
That game is actually, like you said, that game is actually great. The ambition just superseded the scope.
The limitations of the hardware and the development.
Yeah, you really have to know the game inside and out to be able to play it and defeat it. You really have to know what you're doing. It's best to honestly have a guide when you're playing that.
Even the current like Friday the 13th game where you're just like 5 counselors trying to survive a Jason attack, it's not much different when you think about it. Like you're just trying to find the keys and the clues to be able to escape before Jason catches you, which is the same idea as the
Which
NES
is
game.
great. It's the problem that I have. It's that one. It's the Evil Dead game. It's even the Killer Clowns from Outer Space game. Movies I fucking love. Why do they all have to be multiplayer online experiences? Give me like a single player experience that I can at least enjoy too.
Yeah.
So I feel the same way. I don't know why they're so scared to do it. I don't know if it's just because licensing and they have to pay so much for the licensing they can't afford to make like a big game. I don't know if that's what it is. Horror games are huge, and horror properties are huge. It's really hard. I mean, Alien Isolation did it.
That's why we're talking about this. Like that, I think we're getting a little ahead of ourselves. The one that I didn't play, we're going to stick with the NES, or more specifically the Famicom, is of course Sweet Home. Like it's an RPG based haunted mansion and a direct influence on what's probably going to be the main topic. But I'm going to get into a little bit ahead of that and think of the first 3D survival horror game I played, which was Alone in the Dark. I had a demo disc, and I just remember this blocky polygonal werewolf jumping at me, like hopping around like a frog. This is amazing.
Absolutely want to talk about Alone in the Dark as well, because I had a similar experience. But if I can rewind just a bit, when we talk about horror on the NES, we think about stuff like Sweet Home. We think about Castlevania. Those are the immediate knee-jerks. But the thing, even with Nintendo of America's censorship, we got a lot of body horror in our games. Like, if you've ever played the Milton Bradley shooter Abadox, it is essentially one giant body horror experience as a shmup.
I would say Metroid falls into that category.
Oh,
In a lot of ways, yeah.
You're inside a living planet. The whole planet looks like it's breathing around you.
Yep. And the morph ball itself is body horror. because it causes Samus to contort into this unnatural shape.
That's got to be so uncomfortable. Like, there's no way that's a comfortable thing.
And we just take it for granted because video games.
It was inspired by Alien a lot too. Metroid was. Also, Contra had some pretty gnarly stuff in it. Super Ghosts and Goblins. When you get killed and turn into a skeleton.
If we're gonna go 16-bit era though, I want to talk about Splatterhouse. That game.
I fucking love the Splatterhouse games.
I love Splatterhouse games.
You're the killer in this situation. Like,
sure, but the whole goal is still you're saving your girlfriend. You're still the hero.
You're not necessarily the killer in Splatterhouse. You look very much like
you
Jason.
Look like him. It's true. It's a good point. He's not actually that. He was morphed into this monstrous version of himself.
You're playing as a monster among monsters. It's an almost nihilistic approach. It's like, yes, you're the hero, but you're the hero because you're less monstrous than everything else.
Oh, what a great commentary. We got to go to the big topic. What was your first experience when you played the first Resident Evil?
So that was the most scared as a child that I had been in a very long time, was playing the beginning intro to Resident Evil on the PlayStation. The helicopter landing, you find the helicopter crash. Everything goes crazy. The dogs, the intro, the live action intro, which is so dope. And I wish that they would bring that back to video games. I don't know why they don't use more. And then you go in the mansion and you run across your first zombie, and no one can forget this. That it's like munching on this guy, and it turns, and you get that cut scene of the zombie turning to look at you. And I know now the graphics don't hold up like they did, but that was
at the time
fucking terrifying at the time. The most scary thing I'd ever seen in a game.
Ditto.
Right?
I mean, I could basically word for word everything Cody just said. It was like one of the first games I'd ever bought for a PlayStation. I think on the prior shows, I remember I was talking about the story about how I was kind of talked out of buying a Sega Saturn. When I got my PlayStation, I bought Mortal Kombat 3 Ultimate and Resident Evil. And Resident Evil was one of the games where I was like, it just kind of redefined kind of what I really enjoy in video games. I was already kind of a horror fan, even at age like 13 at the time. And just like, again, seeing your first zombie just like turn their head at you. The puzzle aspect of Resident Evil was something I haven't seen quite to that extent, because you have to solve puzzles in order to advance in the game. And that was so outside of even just the horror aspect of it, being able to play Moonlight Sonata on the piano to open the hidden door and stuff like that. Like, that's all was stuff that you just you didn't see a whole lot of that in a game that big, as an initial horror experience. Like, it kind of defined how I was probably going to like proceed with a series like that.
Absolutely. It wasn't until the DualShock re-release of Director's Cut came out that I said, okay, I'm going to grab this. And it's true. That first zombie scene, it stays with you. It's burned into your brain. And then there's moments where you're walking down a slow, quiet hallway and a window breaks because a dog jumps through.
Or when you're in that 5x5 room and the ceiling is slowly coming down on top of you and you have no idea what's going to happen next.
Where you're going to be a Jill sandwich. Yes, exactly.
When I got my PlayStation in 1997, I got Crash Bandicoot and original long box Resident Evil. What I didn't get was a memory card. So death in Resident Evil was permadeath. I died, I had to start over. So that first zombie encounter, the Cerberus dogs jumping through the windows, all the hunters carried so much more weight, because if I died, I had to start from the beginning.
So did you just do the old NES trick of just leaving the system on and turn the TV off and wait till you can play again?
I couldn't, because my PlayStation was hooked up to the family TV. So I had to turn it off, I had to turn it off.
And for a game as big as the original Resident Evil, it was still a massive game.
On top of all of that, when Resident Evil was brought to North America, it was intentionally broken because of the North American rental market. The auto aim that is part of the series during that period was intentionally removed. So it got exponentially more difficult, because you were aiming from a third-person perspective from all these different camera angles. So you basically had to aim using trial and error.
Especially when you got pushed off one scene to another scene where it's an entirely different camera angle and you're totally disoriented. You don't know what's going on.
Well, just that initial zombie that you're talking about where he looks up, you get pushed back into the hallway and you can't see the zombie coming at you until he's in frame.
I just kind of want to point out, because nobody talks about as well, when you play as either character, and you get the best ending, there are still characters missing, which means that they probably got left behind. Like, if you play as Jill and you get the best ending, Rebecca isn't there. When you play as Chris and you get the best ending, Barry isn't there. No matter which ending you get as the best ending, one of the characters who is supposed to survive does not appear.
I'm trying to remember in my memory, but doesn't Barry actually die in game at some point?
That's one of the bad endings.
Do I remember one where Wesker was like...
That Wesker dies? Or am I remembering that wrong too?
No, Wesker dies.
Oh, yeah.
Quote unquote, Wesker dies.
Yes.
Yeah.
No, Wesker died, but I swear I have this vague memory of him being on a helicopter, and I know that's wrong.
You might be thinking about the remake, because they do show Alpha Team hopping off of the helicopter at the beginning.
Yeah, that's so weird how it just like amalgamates in your brain.
I mean, and that's another interesting thing about the first Resident Evil as well, is I don't think it had the most remakes done to it, but it was interesting that we got like a GameCube remake, and then we got like a more modernized remake as well. And I honestly really enjoyed the GameCube remake.
The GameCube remake is one of the best video game remakes of all time.
Yeah.
Fight me.
It's true. And then we got to have Resident Evil 0.
Which is another one of those games where it definitely has its flaws, but it goes back to concepts that were originally planned for the first Resident Evil, like the fact that the inventory boxes were not magical portals that would transport all of your inventory to wherever you were. You had to leave stuff in a box and remember which box you left stuff in. And 0 does that. And fun fact, you can actually unlock that in the GameCube remake. I think it's called True Survivor Mode.
I think you're right. Was it the ink ribbons as well?
There are fewer ink ribbons, yes.
Yeah.
Or were there any ink ribbons?
You know what? I think you're right. I think they actually like completely removed ink ribbons as well.
Yeah.
And then you were playing Chris's version, so everyone got to experience that.
Yeah.
So I think that why they have such staying power and why it was such a good game to start. Like earlier you mentioned Sweet Home, and I was also going to bring up Clock Tower, which was another horror game that was on the SNES. In the SNES era, that was kind of like Resident Evil-y, but it was more like run away when bad things happen kind of thing.
It's funny you mentioned it. That's what I was literally going to say. Yep. Clock Tower, it released the same year.
Clock Tower and Resident Evil are significantly different experiences.
Yes, absolutely.
Well, yeah, one survive, like you just have to live, and the other one is you can fight back a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Well, yeah, but also, I mean, in terms of like the horror genre as well, the thing with Clock Tower, particularly the Super Famicom version, plays very heavily into the Italian giallo genre of horror. The developers loved Dario Argento.
I was going to say, you can feel that vibe. Absolutely.
Well, the main character in the Super Famicom game is literally Jennifer Connelly from Phenomena.
I can say that I enjoyed Resident Evil, the first one. Maybe not as much as you guys, but the minute I got my hands on Resident Evil 2, that's when I was fucking hooked. Like, that game was just so much better. It was, It amped it up. Everything has gone to hell in the town. I'm like, this is where I fucking love like the zombie genre. This is amazing.
Thank you for bringing up Resident Evil 2, because there's an additional thread of commentary between the first game and the second game. In terms of looking at the small town and how the small town is a source of horror as well. If you look at the various letters, diaries, whatever, it reveals the pettiness and the casual cruelty of a bunch of the residents of this small town community. Like, this giant monster that can kill everyone is locked up here. I will torture it. I hope it doesn't get out later.
I hope it doesn't kill Ed. Oh, Ed's dead.
Yeah.
Yep. All that stuff is so good.
Part of the reason the Cerberus dogs and the hunters are as vicious as they are is because the handlers taking care of them abuse them horribly. And then you look at Resident Evil 2 and you get that with people like Chief Irons, who is more of a monster than any of the genetic mutations, because he's doing it not through any sort of genetically engineered prerogative, but because he enjoys it.
So another one that I want to touch on before I get a little bit to my favorite horror series of all time is the Fatal Frame series. Like, they're so well done, but they don't get the recognition that they really deserve, because there's some genuinely horrifying moments in those games. But being able to like to fight back, you're taking pictures of ghosts.
I wish to God that I would have been wearing a smartwatch the first few times that I played the Fatal Frame games, just to have seen what my pulse did during those moments. Because it is strikingly scary for moments.
Oh,
You're just like,
absolutely. The game as a whole is kind of like, I don't want to say bland, but you can pick the beats very, very easily.
Mhm.
But when you're fighting that really intense ghost and it just lunges, you didn't see it coming at any point, your heart stops. Like, it absolutely stops for a second there.
I will see your Fatal Frame and raise you a Siren.
I still have to play Siren. It is part of my backlog, and I own it on PS2. So I have heard so many good things.
Siren builds off of Resident Evil. Siren builds off of the atmosphere of Fatal Frame. And Siren got a lot of flack. The argument is that what you can do is, in order to determine if a monster is near you, you can enter into their perspective to see what they're seeing. And reviewers at the time argued that, oh, if you don't have a frame of reference, you don't know where they are. Here's the thing, though.
Isn't that the point?
Yes. And it gets even more disturbing when you realize that they've detected you and they're moving towards you, because you're watching your imminent demise in real time without having much of a way to stop it, because you don't know exactly where you are, but you know that they're headed towards you because you can see them moving and picking up speed. And so you're starting to panic because, okay, you can see this, but you don't know where it is. You need to get back to your perspective and figure out the best way to get out of there.
To get your bearings back. Oh, that is actually awesome.
On a side note, I'm looking at the images here, and this game would have absolutely made me shit myself. I'm just
that's what I said. Like, I have it on my shelf. It's one of those games where it looks so good, and I always keep going back to my safe, fun games rather than going to the terrifying ones that I really should be playing.
And it's right around the time, because it does look like a Japanese horror game. So if you were like big into The Ring and The Grudge, this would have been right up your alley.
So I have to go back to, I touched on it real quick, is my favorite horror series of all time is Silent Hill. And that's one of the few games, the first Silent Hill on the PS1, that I got like day one launch. No game up to that point had just like terrified me so much that I couldn't really explain it. It was just, I remember playing it at the time, and then that static of the radio and the first monster attacking and just everything from beginning to end, it messes with your head so much that you want to go through it again and again. And thankfully there are so many endings, like the UFO endings. I fucking love the UFO endings.
UFO, the dog.
The dog ending is so great. It really is. So Silent Hill, the first one being on PS1, and then of course some others came out on more modern consoles, which I'll get into a little bit too. But I touch on that one, the psychological side, because one game that for whatever reason just most people keep, I guess, forgetting about, or is just Eternal Darkness. And I fucking love Eternal Darkness. Like, that game is one that I don't have for my collection that I want so badly, just because I want to experience it again.
Yes, Eternal Darkness has a lot going for it until you get to the late game and you have to go through those stupid color-coded temples.
I know. Oh no, that's where I stopped playing the game.
Eternal Darkness, that's the one that like fucks with your head, right? Like it like you don't pretend like it's glitching out on you when it's not.
Yes, that's exactly it. Like, at moments, I remember the first time I played the game, walking through like a hallway, and my head just plain exploded. Like, it's gone now. But the game is still going, and you're walking around as a decapitated body playing this game. This is really cool. So now that we're kind of on these PlayStation horror games, there are so many that are just like, I want to play, but I will never be able to because they're too fucking expensive.
Oh my god.
Like Haunting Ground and Rule of Rose. And then another one that's a little more recent as well is Obscure, which came out on the PS2 and the Xbox. And that was kind of a fun game, but it's not one that I would recommend. That's more me loving to buy bad games.
I don't know if any of you have heard of Cold Fear.
I've heard of it.
So it is Ubisoft's third-person survival horror game from 2004. It takes place on a Russian freighter ship that is slowly being taken over by sorry, the ship itself. Well, yes, the ship itself is being taken over, but so is the crew. The crew is being taken over by this alien entity, and you play from an over-the-shoulder perspective where you have to stop, aim, and move through this ship as this, let's call it a viral outbreak, takes over the crew, causing it to, say, take residence evilly.
That one game that came out on the Dreamcast Carrier, it was a very similar one, but go on.
Well, the thing is, the mechanics are kind of rough, but it does Resident Evil 4 about a month before Resident Evil 4 came out. But yeah, Cold Fear is Resident Evil 4 without the polish of Resident Evil 4.
Okay. I actually would like to look into that.
The one I want to bring up is Parasite Eve.
Yep.
Like that kind of popped up in my brain a little bit. I think we talked about that once before in a prior show. It gets kind of tossed under the radar a little bit because it plays more like an action RPG. Talking about like the body horror stuff, like it's got a lot of that in it, and it's very much like a supernatural, paranormal game that would very much be considered in that genre. It just has a different play style.
Absolutely a good one to hit on.
Did you guys ever play The Suffering?
Yes, The Suffering.
Oh,
How did
yeah.
I forget about that one? I mean, it's not a good game, but it's
not.
different.
I mean,
it's a lot of fun though.
It is.
And I've had conversations with the game's director. So yeah,
cool. Yeah, well, that's a really good game. It's horror, but it's like kind of grounded, and it's actiony in the sense where you got like the third person combat kind of stuff. But really good game that a lot of people haven't talked about. That one doesn't come up as much, and I think it should.
There's that one, and then I own a copy of that, obviously, and I own a copy of The Suffering Ties That Bind. Oh.
It's got a lot of good Clive Barker-esque visuals in it.
Mm-hmm.
Speaking of Clive Barker, because that's another one of those obscure games that I absolutely love, is Clive Barker's Undying for the PC.
Oh, wow.
I have a copy of that.
I have that somewhere too.
The term Holy Grail gets thrown around a lot, but it is one of my grails just because it's so bad and so rare. Konami's Lifeline. What this is it's a PS2 survival horror game from 2003-2004, entirely voice controlled.
I think I know what you're talking about. Yes, now I remember, because I'm like, I've never heard of this one before. And didn't it come with like a headset microphone or something?
I don't know if it came with a headset, but I know that a headset was required. I think most often you had to use the headset that came with SOCOM.
Yes. Like you would get the headset with SOCOM, and this worked with that PlayStation 2 headset. I remember that now. Yes.
Yeah. And
the headset in the picture that I'm seeing says Tom Clancy's Ghost Recon on it.
I mean, that too.
Yeah.
Basically, if you had a USB headset, it would probably.
Oh, yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
I played a lot of Karaoke Revolution back in the day, and any USB headset or any USB microphone works with it. So, yes.
It's an interesting concept. The execution is so incredibly painful because the game has a very narrow recognition for spoken language. So if you have any sort of accent or pronunciation that it doesn't recognize, it won't do what you're asking it to do, or it will try to slot it into the nearest thing it does recognize, which is often completely different from what you're trying to do.
I think I've seen someone like let's play it, because I remember seeing that, and like they wanted them to like go in a locker, and they just kept like backing up, and it's like, no, open the locker, back up, open the locker, stop backing up.
Yeah.
It's like old text-based games, but with voice. If you don't type it exactly how they want to hear it, then it doesn't happen.
Chris, do you want to touch a little bit on Parasite Eve before we move on to maybe the Xbox 360 generation?
Parasite Eve actually builds on some of the stuff that we've already been talking about, like the body horror. One of the things it does, couched in that body horror, is looks at interpersonal dynamics in much the same way that, say, zombie games do. But Aya's partner, and the way that his marriage is falling apart, the way that, yes, he is kind of a bad father, but he's still trying his best. It looks at these dynamics in the window of this horrific apocalyptic happening. It's also fascinating for exactly what it does in terms of the media landscape. At this point, we are kind of comfortable with getting games that are like sequels to movies or the lost season of a TV show. But Parasite Eve was unique at the time and is still fairly unique today in that it is a sequel to a top-selling book. It was written by a biologist. So all of the discussion of things like the mitochondria, cell division, all of that are legitimate and just extended a bit.
As video games have evolved, all of our technology allowing us to have a lot more experiences when it comes to video games. We got to consoles like the PS3, the 360. That touches on one of my favorite horror games that came out for the 360 called Condemned Criminal Origins. It was a really messed up game, but what I loved about it is you were a forensic detective, and you actually had to kind of figure out what was going on, and then things started getting weirder and weirder. And some of the jump scares in that, like the mannequin scene, will stay with me till the day I die.
Okay, so I have a copy of Condemned,
Mhm.
but I haven't played it yet. So help me out here. Please tell me it's more than just, hey, homeless people are scary and they'll get violent if you show up.
It's deeper than it really lets on, because it's like, yes, it's, oh my gosh, homeless people that are on drugs are going to kill me. Like, that's what's going to happen. There is a lot more to it. And then there's Condemned 2, which has like one of the most terrifying sequences I've ever experienced in a game, where you are in a cabin and something is hunting you and you don't know what the fuck it is. Like, you have no idea, and something's like tearing at the walls and trying to grab you, and you think it's a monster, and it turns out it's just a bear with rabies. And it's terrifying as fuck, because you turn and it's there and its face is all like deformed, and oh, it still like gives me shivers. It's so good.
Oh, and
So
it
yes.
plays so good. That
Oh,
bear
so
chase,
you did get to play it too, Cody. Yes, absolutely.
yes, that bear chase is so intense.
Mhm.
It's so terrifying. And yeah, Condemned, those games, yeah, criminally underrated. No pun intended.
But I think that's a good point too, because like as Chris brought up, is it presents itself as a very generic game where you're basically killing homeless people. That's the presentation it puts out there, but there is so much more to it. So I would absolutely recommend playing Condemned and Condemned 2.
Oh yeah, and from that era, I mean, you had a lot of stuff coming out at that point in time. You had
Mhm.
the zombie resurgence really started then. You know, you've got like the Dead Rising games coming out.
Mhm. I nearly went on Dead Rising like 5 or 6 times while we're talking about Resident Evil, because there's so many like
Yeah,
parallels. But it's
Well,
just
it's all
so,
Capcom.
it's Capcom, but it's also so like comically over the top that I wouldn't even consider it horror, because it's just so ridiculous. Because Frank West, he covered wars, you know.
at this point, the Resident Evil series has went through a vast change because I mean, initially Resident Evil was a puzzle game that they decided to make spooky initially, I think, and then they just kind of kept going with that. It was built around those puzzles for the first game, and then we've came all the way up to it being an action game at this point.
And it's good that you mentioned that too, because Resident Evil was the top horror experience. It had to modify itself and become something a little bit different. I personally liked Resident Evil 5, boulder punching aside. I didn't really like Resident Evil 6, and I will definitely get into Resident Evil 7. But as far as like the evolution of Resident Evil, after Resident Evil 2, did you continue to play the games, or did you kind of like drop off?
I played 5 and I never got into 6. I played 5 for, again, like you said, because it brought back Chris Redfield, and I kind of wanted to pick up back on his story. But like just trying to play the game around Sheva, and just like you said, like the dude has so much upper body strength, it's not even funny. He became like a super soldier. The theme of the game just kind of changed, not for
the better.
not for the better.
Yeah.
And it didn't have the same vibe that I wanted, and it just like, I mean, it had its moments, but it kind of felt like that, kind of like you were talking about. It's like it felt like I was just running around beating up on helpless people.
Yeah.
Like that didn't have like a chance at all, and it's just like you're just like super soldiering through everybody.
It didn't feel like Resident
The
Evil,
kind of game that you wanted to play.
for a lack of a better term. And Shiva's AI was some of the worst. It was so
It was
bad.
obnoxious, so obnoxious.
I stayed with it pretty much the whole time. With Resident Evil 4, I remember playing it a little bit when it first came out, and I didn't complete it. But then I got it on the Wii, and it was like really fun to play with the motion controls. And then 5, played the crap out of that just because it was fun to play with a partner.
When it was when you had a co-op experience with that, it was so much fun. But when I was playing on my own, I hated it.
Yeah. And then played 6, and of course, what Oh, you had so much good stuff that you could have done, and you just quick time evented the fuck out of it.
Mhm.
Um, what a nightmare of a game, and
Yep.
and storyline. Like what is happening?
Mhm.
Yeah, I kind of stuck with the series. I always played it. I was loyal. I just yeah, there were iterations that I liked better. Like you were talking about earlier, like the GameCube version of Resident Evil One is, my opinion, the best version.
Mhm.
You know, they would remake it for another console, and it would be just slightly better, and
Mhm.
I would get more into it.
That's why I wanted to ask you guys, because I'm going to ask Chris a question I know he'll be able to answer. Is I know I wasn't alone in that. Like, I know a bunch of people, like Resident Evil 5, I wouldn't say it almost destroyed the series, but Chris, have you found like there was a big drop off between 4 and 5? Like, a lot of Resident Evil fans kind of said, I'm done with this.
No, actually.
Okay.
That happened between 5 and 6. 5 is actually one of the most successful games Capcom has ever released. Period.
Hmm.
Full stop across its now almost 50-year history.
Oh.
Yeah. It rode that success for a decade. Admittedly, that success is tied to various re releases, like the
Mhm.
Gold Edition.
That's the one I got to, the Gold Edition.
Yeah, the Gold Edition, the remaster for the next generation, like PS4, Xbox
Mhm.
One, the subsequent remasters for the PS5 and Xbox One X, the
Mhm.
Switch edition. So Capcom did do some number fudging there, but Resident Evil 5 across all of its iterations is one of the most successful games Capcom has ever put out. The thing is, Resident Evil 6, people think it was a failure. It was not. It was commercially successful,
Hmm.
but it was not commercially successful on the same level as Resident Evil 5. And because we live in a horrifically capitalist structure
Money
where
talks.
money talks and there has to be constant growth and not homeostasis, the success of Resident Evil 6 was seen as a failure. And
Which is
so,
interesting because I know anyone that played Resident Evil 6 didn't enjoy the experience either.
no, but enough people bought
Bought
it
it.
on name recognition alone. I'm guilty of it. I
Yeah,
remember.
I know, me too.
There was a lot of hype behind it too with the multiplayer because that was like really their first like big push into multiplayer, wasn't it?
Uh,
Like they had one multiplayer game before that, but like as far as a new generation console, like a next gen at the time,
okay, what do you mean
like that
by
was like their first.
multiplayer?
Like like mercenaries mode, right? Like where they
Yes.
like went full
Yeah,
tilt into
they'd
mercenaries
have
mode.
like 6 or 7 people just running around
Oh,
popping zombies.
okay, I think you're thinking of Operation Raccoon City then, which is a much
Sorry,
different.
that's what I was
Oh,
thinking of too. Yes, Operation Raccoon City. Yes, Volume
I
1.
Yeah,
forgot about that game.
yeah, that one.
I blocked it out.
It was actually developed by Slant Six, the guys who made the SOCOM series. Believe it or
Mhm.
not, with Resident Evil 6, the problem was that they were trying to
Well, I
appease.
felt there were too many characters. That was the
Yeah,
first problem.
they were trying to do too much at once. That's why there were so many characters. They wanted to go with the horror route that the early games went with to appease long-term fans. They wanted to go with the action route
Hmm.
to appease fans of 4 and 5. They wanted to
Hmm.
try to push the game forward, and because it was all of these at once, it wound up having one of the largest development teams ever assembled at the time. Like, I kind of wish I hadn't pre-ordered it, but at the same time, I don't regret that I got it. If that
That's a
makes
good way
sense.
to put it. It actually makes a lot of sense because I bought it when it was used. Like, probably 3 or 4 months in, when people had traded in copies, I'm like, oh, I can buy this game for like $30 now. Okay, cool. And yeah, it didn't grip me. I
Do you
wish it did.
remember that this was the era of the shitty pre-order bonus,
Oh,
like
yes.
goodies that you would get with stuff as well?
Yes, I would love to. That's definitely a topic for another day. So, what I'm going to do is I'm going to move on to a couple tiny bits before we start getting into some of the last modern ones. Is I don't know if I'd be able to play it again because when I played it, I was a lot younger and not a dad. Was Among the Sleep, which is
Mm.
a horror game from the toddler's perspective, where you're basically playing as like a 1 year old wandering through this hellscape of everything, trying to figure out what's going on. And I still love that game so much to this day, because of the story that's interwoven throughout it. And I will always give credit to that game for it being like, because it's such an indie darling game.
Dude, this looks so good. I think it's cartoony enough to like.
That's true. It's a little bit more
Kind of like
cell shaded. It's true.
separate you from it, but yeah, it does look like basically like a toddler having nightmares in real time.
Mm-hmm. And the last one I'll touch on, Alan Wake. I fucking love Alan Wake.
Yeah, I need to play
perfect. 2. Yeah, I'm playing 2 right now. I'm almost at the end of it.
Well, the first one was such a mind fuck. It was just from beginning to end. And it was the mechanic that got me continuing to play that game, where here's this flashlight and you boost your flashlight to like weaken an enemy and then you can kill them. But the story from beginning to end, you're going like, what the fuck is happening next? And then that ending. I don't want to spoil it because it is so good. Fuck.
Just, don't play American Nightmare.
No, it's not that.
Oh,
they I don't know what that was all about. They were trying something different.
Spend the money on the DLC or get like the complete version. Do not go anywhere near American Nightmare. It's absolutely true. So talking about a lot of like the retro horror games, having to stop at the 360 generation was very difficult for us. So I think we've come to the conclusion at some time in the near future, we're going to do a part 2 on much more modern horror video games. So to kind of cap this off, a quick roundtable end question. What would be your guys' dream horror video game project? It can be modern. It can be retro, no budget. I'm going to start with you, Chris.
Oh, so I'm going to go kind of...
loaded question.
It is such a loaded question. That's why I'm doing it.
Such a loaded question. God damn it, Matt. I would want a modern clock tower game, not Project Scissor, because that had too much interference, but a modern clock tower game where you incorporate more of the Argento experience, but get some of that surrealist environmental storytelling as well, with modern graphics, with modern controls, and quality of life improvements, so that you get the atmosphere of, as you were saying, Resident Evil 7 or 8 in VR with a clock tower experience. Because if you think about the sequence in 7 where the father is just juggernauting through the house,
that's my best example, is when he's doing that, I found that you can hide in the basement and he doesn't go down in the basement. And for the first time in any video game, I said, I'm comfortable waiting here for 20 minutes.
Now, picture that with the Scissor Man.
Oh, that would be so epic. And he pops out of anywhere.
Yep.
Yes. That is a phenomenal answer. Amazing. All right, Cody, same question. What would be your dream horror video game project? No budget.
No budget?
No budget.
Just make it as big as possible. Okay. I would take the original Resident Evil 1, indefinitely. I need it to be a much bigger game. The time that you spend in the mansion should be half of the game, and it should be huge. It should be the length of the entire original game. The puzzle should be expanded. There should be times when you have to go back and backtrack. Very much Metroidvania, but then those zombies have come back and they're more powerful, and it's not like a playthrough. It's more narrative based. And then once you get down underneath the mansion, then you've got a whole other game where you're just playing through labs and fighting through, corridors and experiments. And that game, it could be so huge. And I really hope they give it that Final Fantasy VII remake treatment where they make it so big.
Break it into a bunch of parts and make it a much more large and epic experience than it could be, or actually than it already is. Okay, that could be amazing. Okay, I really like that. All right, Dustin, same question. Dream horror video game project, no budget, no studio restrictions. What do you think?
I know we kind of already have talked about this in chat, but I'm going to change my answer.
Oh, you are?
I'm not
about this one. Okay.
A, I don't want to steal it from you, and B,
no. I've changed my answer completely. Go right ahead. Yes.
All right, look, I'll just say this right off the top of the bat. Konami needs to fucking release PT and Silent Hills. Period. End of discussion. You don't get away with not getting Norman Reedus and fucking Guillermo del Toro in a game and then not fucking release it. Konami, if you're fucking listening to this, you fucking release it right now. You fucking hear me?
Put it out.
I will fly to fucking wherever you're at and just kick a door down. Anyway.
I would still love to have Hideo Kojima be behind that, but it could work without him. I really, really hate to say that, but it could work without him.
I just want whatever they were working on to be released, even if it's only a partial game. Like, I can just put it out into the ether, make it a demo. I don't care.
Oh, just re-release PT again.
PT plus whatever Silent Hills was going to be. But what could be done with a really cool remake, and it was a game that I was going to talk about, and I haven't quite got on top of it yet. Was if you guys have ever played Fear?
Yes, the Fear games were really good.
Yeah,
and they were
earlier too. Yeah.
They were so damn good. I specifically played number 2 on PS3 back in the day, and there were so many really cool jump scares throughout that game that were like, you could just tell the game was like a really triggering environment. Like there were certain things you would do without the game that would trigger an event, or like you would see a ghost just kind of the girl just kind of randomly appear in different areas. Like rooms would turn bright red and bloody, and like it was so psychologically just kind of messed with you that I think with a bigger budget, and it kind of played to that FPS aspect too. So like if you're a big in Call of Duty or Battlefield, if you gave them the friggin' like Activision budget to like create something in that same genre, you could come up with something super cool and psychological, especially if you like do something like they did with Senua's Sacrifice, Hellblade, like make it a psychological binaural audio type thing where shit's just like messing with your head if you wear headphones. They did something like that with that game, like it would crush, I think. And I would love to see Fear just kind of like make a reemergence into like a modern gaming console. I think it would be really cool to see.
Especially when Alma, like her whispering in your ear, and then you turn and there's nothing. Yes, there could be some real good potential there. Okay, I like that. So I was originally going to say, yes, I want PT. I want the full experience. Let's release it. But as we were doing this podcast and we started talking about the original Friday the 13th on the NES, I don't want a Friday the 13th multiplayer game. I want a full single player experience. And this is why I say no budget, no restraints, no anything, that uses the Nemesis system from the Shadow of War and Shadow of Mordor games, where you are having your counselors level up as Jason attacks them. If they get away, they're stronger. They remember that situation. And the next time they go in, they can fight back a little bit better. Would you play as the counselors or as Jason? I haven't fully decided that part yet. I think it would be a very interesting perspective to play as Jason in that situation. But I like the idea of just this much more revamped version of the NES game. And then for shits and giggles, a cheat code that lets you have him be completely purple.
You could do like a Resident Evil 2 type thing too, where they just released the same game from 2 different perspectives.
That would be fantastic. This has had to be one of my all-time favorite episodes to record with you guys. I knew it was going to be good. I knew it was going to be touching on Resident Evil. I didn't realize that we could possibly do a part 2. So if you listeners out there are interested when it comes to modern horror games, let me know. Once again, guys, it has been amazing to have you join me. Chris, is there anything that you'd like to talk about before we leave today?
My YouTube channel is coming up on its 5-year anniversary, so I'm going to have a huge special episode for that. No spoilers, but it's going to be long.
I am looking forward to that 5-year anniversary. Congratulations, Chris. I remember when you started your channel, and it has evolved to something pretty goddamn awesome. So congratulations. All right, Dustin, is there anything coming up that you'd like to talk about? I know you're not as active in like content creation. So are there any like scary movies or TV shows you'd like to talk about for a minute?
Honestly, if you want to talk about it, like just this could be a whole other topic too, is like horror games being turned into movie franchises. But Until Dawn is supposed to be coming out in the near future.
Yes, I'm looking forward to that. And that's one I wanted to get into as well.
So here's the thing. I'm looking forward to it too. But when I watched the previews, it has like damn near nothing to do with the actual game. Like none of it. Like you could have named it anything other than Until Dawn. It still would have looked just as good. But it's like, I don't know. Why'd you have to take the game IP and turn it into something that it's not? But that's neither here nor there.
We're going to have another Halo situation, aren't we?
I don't know. Maybe.
Okay.
But but yeah, basically, I am looking forward to Until Dawn when it comes out. As far as the horror movies go, I think Sinners comes out this weekend too, which I'm kind of thinking about maybe going to see.
Okay, I figured I'd leave the mic open. Cody, how about yourself? How can people listen to your AFK BRB podcast, or is there anything else that you're working on currently?
Oh yeah, you can find that podcast on Spotify. All the episodes are up currently. I'm working on a few horror projects as far as films. I'm in a series that's being shot right now called The Narrator. That is a anthological horror show. I'm in the first episode and flashbacks and in the future. Probably going to appear in several more episodes as well. Since it's an anthology, we kind of use the same cast. It's in different settings. It's going to be really cool. It's covering like old monsters and folklore. Really fun project that I'm working on right now. Also, looking forward to, like they're converting all these video games into movies. And so far, there's been some great ones. Last of Us Season 2 just started. So far, so good. Want to see Sinners. There is the Resident Evil movie revamp that they're doing now.
I've heard the rumors. Yep. That's why I mentioned it.
Barbarian director. So I'm actually, really interested in that, like we were talking about, because it's a good movie. Barbarian was good. And somebody can finally, do it correctly. I always wanted to see George Romero's version because I've read the script and it was damn near right on the money.
Mm-hmm.
But we didn't get that.
Yep, I know. I've seen the scripts online too. George Romero had something amazing going on there, but I also love that man. And then you, the listeners, thank you so much. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe and share Matt's Digital Odyssey with someone that you think might also enjoy listening. So until next time, keep exploring, keep dreaming, and I'll see you in the next Odyssey.